Well, it's an extraordinary moment in the history of the country where the kind of Cold War, the Cold Civil War, that has defined our politics, and we've used different kinds of language or descriptions of that Cold Civil War, deep extreme partisanship and the like, deep political division. But the Cold Civil War became hot on January 6th. Donald Trump declaring that if uh, the people who attended the march, if they did not act, that they would lose their country. To see the battle flag of the Confederacy, uh, you know, marched around the Capitol, to see this mob of white voters. It was mixed with white Christian nationalist, white supremacist discourse, this kind of gaggle of grievance and fear and hatred, mobilized to overturn an election, right? Gave the nation a sense of the fact, of the reality that we were standing on the precipice, that the deep divisions in the country were more than just simply disagreements, political disagreements, that they cut to the bone, actually through the bone, to the marrow of the bone. I was on television. I think I was talking with Christine Amanpour at the time it happened, and we were struck by the nature of the violence, by the response of the congressmen and women. You heard Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell condemn Trump, but within a matter of weeks, they began to retell the story. So historically, it represented this kind of the Cold War became hot for a moment, but then almost immediately there was an effort to rewrite what happened, to disremember, to use Toni Morrison's language. And here 4 years later, this combination of active forgetting and willful lies or willful ignorance in this regard, right, has brought us to this moment where Trump is about to be inaugurated as the 47th president of the United States, which is just mind-blowing. Because the so-called forgotten American, or the silent majority, they've never been forgotten or silent. They've always been loud and always have in so many ways impacted the direction, the trajectory of American politics, of policy decisions. In so many ways, what Nixon and others have been doing, what they did and are continuing to do, is to exploit this sense of grievance and fear that these people are somehow losing control over the country. The so-called forgotten American, in the face of demographic shifts in the country, the browning of America. Somehow this country no longer belongs to you. What does that mean in its detail? In its detail, it means that these folk are really exercised over the fact that perhaps America will no longer be a white nation in the vein of old Europe. So what does it mean for the Democratic Party to pander to that? Donald Trump he said at one point that unlike President Abraham Lincoln, he would have compromised with the South. Now, I'm not obviously kind of equating the forgotten or silent majority with the Confederacy, but there's a linkage here. There's a connection here. But what would it mean to compromise with the South over the issue of slavery? What does that entail? Who would bear the burden of the compromise? So the Democratic Party has found itself since the mid 20th century, since the Black freedom struggle, in which, Lyndon Johnson passes civil rights legislation and voting rights legislation and declares that he's lost the South for a generation. And we see all of these Southern Democrats migrate into the Republican Party. We see at one point, those George Wallace Democrats, right, become, interestingly enough, Reagan Democrats. And we've witnessed over and over again Democratic leaders trying to, like a scorned lover, trying to get those particular white voters to return to the fold. And how have they done it? Well, if we think about the history of the Democratic Leadership Conference, The idea was to cozy up to Wall Street and Silicon Valley and distance the party from its traditional base. That's white, that's working class union folk and black folk. And so you get this triangulation, you get this reimagining of the Democratic Party to look like or and sound like Republican light. This is Bill Clinton. This is Al Gore. This is the Paul Begalas. This is the Jim Carvilles. These are the folk who are clamoring for the party to win back, right? Those white working class voters that they themselves turned their backs on. This is fascinating, right? So I keep asking myself the question, what does it mean? What does it mean to try to curry favor with a constituency that believes that their life circumstance requires, right, the disavowal of issues that confront people of color, that confront women, that confront the LGBTQ plus community and the like? What does it mean to consent to that, to concede to that in a way? So I'm reluctant to concede to some of these folk who are talking about the Democratic Party changing course only to kowtow to that electorate that turned its attention to Donald Trump.